Support the channel by subscribing. It helps us create new stories about the real America for you.
Picture a river fortress, so impregnable Confederate generals called it their Gibraltar of the Mississippi. Island number 10 commanded the waterway like a stone fist, bristling with cannon that could shred any vessel daring approach its killing zone. General John Pope stared at maps in his tent, tracing the horseshoe bend with frustrated fingers. 5 weeks besieging this island, yet rebels held firm. His army waited on Missouri's shore, powerless without naval support to cross downriver. Simple geometry trapped him. The island sat in a tight curve, guns positioned to rake any ship attempting passage. Confederate artillery crews trained their sights on water no captain could survive traversing in daylight. The river itself became their prison. I'm Commander Henry Walke, studying black water from my Ironclad deck. The Carondelet is a floating metal coffin, slow and clumsy. Tonight I'll take her past those rebel batteries alone, through darkness thick as ink, gambling everything on audacity. My crew wrapped smokestacks with wet hay bales, desperate to muffle the engine's roar. We lashed coal barges alongside as makeshift armor. Every man aboard knew this night run defied sanity. One well-aimed shell could send us to the river bottom. At 10 o'clock, I gave the order. Carondelet slipped her moorings like a departing ghost. Rain fell in sheets, masking our advance. Lightning flickered across storm clouds, threatening to expose our silhouette against the electric sky's cruel, revealing illumination. The Ironclad hugged Missouri's shore, creeping forward at barely walking speed. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every paddle wheel revolution sounded like thunder to my ears. How could rebels not hear this mechanical beast crawling past their doorstep? Then, disaster. The hay insulation caught fire, sending sparks fountaining from the smokestack like 4th of July celebration. Flames painted our position on darkness. Confederate sentries shouted alarm. Drums beat wildly across island fortifications. We were exposed, vulnerable, doomed. Rebel gunners scrambled to their pieces, ramming home powder and shot. The first cannon erupted, its flash splitting night. The shell screamed overhead, missing by yards. More guns opened up, creating hellish orchestra. Carondelet trembled beneath each near misses fury. I pushed engines harder, coaxing impossible speed from our sluggish vessel. Shots splashed around us like hailstones. One shell struck the coal barge, exploding in black fragments. My crew worked their stations with grim determination, refusing panic despite death's proximity. For 2 hours we endured this gauntlet, every second stretching like eternity. Then suddenly, firing ceased. We had passed beyond effective range. Behind us, Island number 10's guns fell silent. Carondelet had accomplished the impossible. We had sailed through hell. At New Madrid, General Pope's soldiers erupted in celebration when our Ironclad appeared through morning fog. Now they had naval power below the island. The strategic equation had shifted dramatically. The Confederates' Gibraltar was suddenly surrounded, trapped between Union forces. 6 nights later, Ironclad Pittsburgh repeated Walke's daring run. 2 gunboats below the island meant Pope could finally ferry his army across the Mississippi. The noose tightened around the rebel garrison like a hangman's rope, drawing inexorably, inevitably closed. Colonel William McCall watched his defensive masterpiece crumble from island ramparts. Orders were clear, hold at all costs, but Union troops now crossed the river unopposed. Supply lines were severed. The fortress had become a prison. His Gibraltar was actually a tomb. McCall's men gazed at ironclads patrolling downriver, cutting off retreat. Behind them, Pope's artillery pounded positions relentlessly. The island shook with each impact. Earthworks that seemed impregnable weeks ago now felt like graves waiting to be filled with Confederate corpses. At Tiptonville, Tennessee, McCall faced impossible mathematics on April 7th. 7,000 Union soldiers were closing in. His own force numbered 5,000, isolated on a peninsula with the river blocking escape. The trap had sprung shut completely, perfectly. Scouts returned with devastating news. Union columns approached from 3 directions. Ironclads controlled water. No reinforcements would arrive. McCall gathered his officers for a council everyone knew would end in surrender. Pride couldn't stop bullets or feed starving men. Young Confederate soldiers stacked rifles in neat pyramids, tears streaming down faces blackened by gunpowder. They had believed Island number 10 invincible. Now they marched into captivity, 5,000 men who would spend years in northern prison camps rotting slowly. Pope's victory yielded staggering prizes: 5,000 prisoners, 7,000 small arms, 100 heavy cannon. The Mississippi River route lay open to Memphis. Confederate defenses in Tennessee collapsed like dominoes. One night's daring had changed everything permanently. In Richmond, President Jefferson Davis absorbed catastrophic news in stunned silence. Island Number 10 was supposed to be impregnable, unconquerable. Its fall exposed the South's vulnerability like a wound. Northern newspapers celebrated Walke as hero who broke the rebellion's spine. But what drove me to attempt such madness? My officers had argued against the night run, citing suicidal odds. Perhaps I understood that wars are won by men willing to gamble everything when calculations fail. Fortune favors the boldly desperate. Consider the rebel gunners' frustration, firing blindly into darkness at targets they heard but couldn't see.
Support the channel by subscribing. It helps us create new stories about the real America for you.
Their shells screamed past empty water while the Ironclad crept beyond range. Superior firepower meant nothing without accurate sight. Technology had limitations frustrating expertise. The Carondelet's crew never forgot that night. Years later, we would gather and recount each terrifying moment. Sparks betraying our position. Shells exploding close enough to feel heat. The agonizing slowness of our vessel. We had brushed death repeatedly, intimately. Island Number 10's fall demonstrated brutal lessons about modern warfare. Fixed fortifications, no matter how powerful, could be outmaneuvered by mobile forces. The age of static river defenses was dying. Railroads and ironclads rewrote all previous strategic calculations completely. General Halleck, commanding all Union forces in the West, immediately grasped the victory's significance. The Mississippi River was the rebellion's spine. Control it, and you split the Confederacy in half. Island Number 10 was the first vertebra broken cleanly. For Confederate commanders downstream, panic spread like wildfire. If Island Number 10 could fall, what fortress was truly safe? Fort Pillow's garrison nervously scanned the river. Memphis's citizens watched horizons anxiously. The Union juggernaut was rolling southward unstoppably now. Pope's siege tactics had been methodical and crushing in execution. He dug a canal across the peninsula, bypassing the island's guns. He brought up heavy artillery, pounding rebel positions continuously. Then Walke's night run delivered the knockout blow perfectly timed. Think about McCall's impossible position at Tiptonville. He commanded men who trusted him to lead them home. Yet military duty demanded he hold ground until relieved. When no relief came, surrender became the only option, preventing pointless, wasteful slaughter. Prisoners marched north toward Camp Douglas and other detention facilities. Many would never see homes again. Disease ravaged prison camps on both sides. Some historians estimate more soldiers died in captivity than perished at Gettysburg's 3 bloody days combined. Walke's night run inspired imitating attempts throughout the war. At Vicksburg the following year, Admiral Porter would run entire fleets past Confederate batteries. But Island Number 10 was the first, the prototype proving such audacious maneuvers could succeed against overwhelming firepower. The Ironclad Carondelet became legend on Western rivers. She would fight in dozens more engagements, her armor scarred by countless impacts. But her crew always remembered that April night when we sailed through hell and emerged victorious beyond expectations' limits. General Pope's career would follow a tragic arc after this triumph. After Island Number 10's glory, he commanded the Army of Virginia and suffered crushing defeat at Second Manassas. One victory cannot sustain military reputation. War is unforgiving of subsequent failures. The Mississippi River Campaign of 1862 transformed the war's strategic landscape permanently. Island Number 10, Fort Pillow, Memphis, each Confederate stronghold, fell in sequence. By summer, Union gunboats prowled the river nearly to Vicksburg. The rebellion's territory shrank daily. Imagine Confederate soldiers' bitterness at Tiptonville. They had manned guns faithfully, endured Pope's bombardment, believed in their fortress's strength. Then 2 ironclads slipped past in darkness, rendering all sacrifice meaningless. Sometimes courage isn't enough to win wars. Naval innovation drove these Union victories decisively. The ironclad revolutionized river warfare as dramatically as railroads transformed land campaigns. Wooden vessels were obsolete overnight. Metal armor and steam engines rewrote tactical possibilities. Technology was accelerating beyond traditional military thinking's capacity. The night run required extraordinary seamanship from me and my crew, navigating a clumsy ironclad through darkness, in storms, past hostile batteries, through treacherous currents. Any single factor could have doomed us. We succeeded through skill, preparation, and considerable luck blessing us. Confederate President Davis faced mounting criticism after Island No. 10's loss. How could a supposedly impregnable fortress fall so quickly, so completely? The South's newspapers demanded answers and accountability. Military defeats erode civilian morale more effectively than any battlefield carnage possibly can. For Union soldiers celebrating at New Madrid, victory meant renewed hope burning bright. After Bull Run's humiliation and repeated setbacks in Virginia, the West finally delivered success. Lincoln needed victories desperately for political survival. Island No. 10 proved the rebellion could be beaten. Strategic consequences rippled outward like waves from stones dropped in still water. Confederate General Beauregard, commanding at Corinth, Mississippi, suddenly found his western flank exposed dangerously. Union forces could now threaten his supply lines. The entire theater tilted northward irreversibly. Think about Confederate High Command's impossible dilemma facing limited resources. They lacked sufficient troops to defend every river fortress, every railroad junction, every strategic city simultaneously. Union numerical superiority meant rebels had to choose which positions to hold. Island No. 10 was sacrificed. The 5,000 prisoners represented manpower the Confederacy could not replace easily. The South's smaller population meant every captured soldier was permanent loss. The North could draft replacements endlessly from immigrant populations. This mathematical reality would eventually strangle the rebellion completely. Walke's personal courage inspired his crew beyond measure. A commander who shares his men's danger earns loyalty that orders alone cannot command. He could have sent another captain on that night run. Instead, he piloted Carondelet himself, leading from the front. The storm that night was both curse and blessing, paradoxically. Rain obscured visibility, protecting the ironclad from accurate fire. But lightning threatened to expose our position completely. Nature remained neutral in this war, aiding and hindering both sides with democratic impartiality. Consider rebel gunners' professional frustration mounting with each miss. They were skilled artillerymen, trained to deadly accuracy. Yet darkness rendered their expertise useless completely. They fired at sounds, at shadows, at where they imagined targets might be. Every miss deepened helpless rage. Pope's canal digging demonstrated Union engineering prowess and industrial capacity. When direct assault proved too costly, they altered geography itself. This foreshadowed Sherman's later campaigns, where Northern armies would rip up railroads, destroy infrastructure, wage total war against the rebellion's supporting foundations. The island's fortifications still exist today, though nature has reclaimed most structures gradually. Visitors can walk where Confederate gunners once stood, imagining that desperate night when Union ironclads challenged their supremacy. History echoes in these quiet places, whispering of vanished struggles. Military historians debate whether McCall surrendered too quickly at Tiptonville. Could he have broken through Union lines? Perhaps. But at what cost in blood? He chose his men's survival over hopeless heroism. Sometimes the bravest decision is accepting defeat gracefully, wisely. Victory's timing proved crucial for strategic exploitation. Spring floods made the Mississippi particularly treacherous. Walke navigated not just past enemy guns, but through swollen currents that could capsize his top-heavy ironclad. Nature itself seemed aligned against his audacious attempt's success completely. Union naval supremacy on western rivers contrasted sharply with Confederate dominance on Atlantic coast, where CSS Virginia terrorized wooden Union warships. The war divided into distinct theaters, each with unique characteristics. Victory required adapting strategies to local conditions, not following rigid doctrines. Think about psychological impact on Confederate soldiers watching their Gibraltar crumble before their eyes. If Island No. 10 could fall, what position was truly secure? Morale is warfare's invisible weapon, more devastating than any artillery barrage when properly weaponized against enemies. The night run became legend in naval circles throughout both fleets. Future captains studied Walke's tactics, seeking lessons applicable to their own challenges. Bold initiative, meticulous preparation, Acceptance of calculated risk, these principles transcended specific circumstances, becoming timeless wisdom for military leaders everywhere. Pope's methodical siege demonstrated that patient strategy could overcome seemingly impossible obstacles effectively. He didn't attack the island directly, he isolated it, rendered it irrelevant, forced its surrender through position rather than frontal assault. This approach would define Union Western campaigns henceforth. The Confederate defenders' perspective reveals war's tragedy most clearly. They fought bravely, following orders, manning their posts faithfully until the end. Yet strategic miscalculations beyond their control doomed their efforts. Individual courage cannot compensate for high command's failures. Soldiers pay for generals' mistakes. My crew received no medals, no public celebrations for our night's work. We were professionals doing our duty as we understood it. Yet our contribution to Union victory exceeded many more famous battles. Sometimes history's most consequential moments occur in obscurity, unwitnessed except by participants. The April 7th surrender date held symbolic weight for future events. Exactly 1 year later, Union and Confederate forces would clash at Shiloh, producing casualty numbers that shocked both nations profoundly. War's escalation from Island No. 10's relatively bloodless capture to Shiloh's carnage demonstrated conflict's darkening trajectory. Consider how technology accelerated this war's pace beyond previous conflicts. Railroads moved armies faster than ever before. Telegraphs transmitted news instantly across continents. Ironclads revolutionized naval warfare overnight. Industrial capacity determined outcomes more than individual heroism. Modern war had arrived, though few recognized it. The Mississippi River's strategic importance cannot be overstated by historians. It bisected the Confederacy, carrying commerce, moving troops, defining boundaries. Control the river, and you controlled the continent's heartland. Lincoln understood this intuitively. His generals learned it through bitter, costly experience. For civilians in Memphis and Point South, Island No. 10's fall brought war suddenly closer to their doorsteps. Union gunboats would soon appear in their harbors. The rebellion's protective shield had shattered permanently. Fear replaced confidence in drawing rooms throughout the South's interior regions. My decision to proceed despite the smokestack fire demonstrates crisis leadership under extreme pressure. Retreat meant failure and shame. Continuing meant probable death for everyone. I chose forward, gambling that darkness and speed might still preserve us. Great commanders make such calculations instinctively. Prisoner's fate reminds us that war's suffering extends far beyond battlefields. Years in prison camps, far from homes and families, watching comrades die from disease, and neglect. These men paid dearly for their general's strategic miscalculations. Victory and defeat are always measured in human cost. Pope's victory demonstrated that Western theater operations were finally matching Virginia's drama and significance. Newspapers that previously ignored Missouri and Tennessee now featured these campaigns prominently on front pages. The war's strategic center of gravity was shifting inexorably westward toward the river's control. The ironclads that changed everything at Island No. 10 were crude vessels by later standards. Slow, poorly ventilated, prone to mechanical failure constantly. Yet they represented technological revolution in naval warfare. Within decades, steel battleships would dominate oceans. Carondelet was an awkward ancestor of modern navies. Think about the moment when McCall ordered surrender to superior forces. He knew this decision would haunt him forever after. Officers who surrender face whispered accusations of cowardice, regardless of circumstances' reality. Yet he chose his men's survival over his own reputation's preservation. That requires different courage entirely. The battle's lessons echoed throughout military academies for generations of officers. Fixed defenses are vulnerable to mobility. Mobility beats firepower. Audacity can overcome superior position. These principles, learned in one April night's desperate gamble, would influence strategic thinking long after the war's conclusion permanently. Island No. 10 stands now as memory's monument, a place where one night's courage changed history's course forever. The river flows past as it always has, indifferent to human struggles. Yet something lingers there, an echo of that April darkness when steel and resolve challenged stone and won.
If you're curious to find out what happened next, subscribe. The sequel is coming soon.